Welcome back to Powers Powwow. Today we're with Ron Sutton
Right.
at fire station here, where you've got the original fire truck.
Right. I'm, like Jim says, I'm Ron Sutton. I'm a past volunteer firefighter in Waterford. Back in 2018, we needed a place to house our fire truck, our 1941 GMC American pumper. So we decided to go to the township and ask them about building this fire hall. And with the help of the supervisor, Gary Wall, he gave the okay, and we built the fire station. And with a lot of volunteers, and it was fully funded by the Waterford Volunteer Firefighters Association. And so here we are today. And we got Hank Callahan, who's a past volunteer.
Hank Callahan, volunteer. My father was a volunteer, first one.
And we're here with Chief Matt Covey.
Hey, Matt.
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, so this is a really cool scenario here that Ron and helped champion this fire station to kind of keep our departmental history going, and it's impressive to what's happened here. And you know, they've been the record keeper for years, and hopefully I carry on that torch. But it's a great thing to have this in Waterford and have our first original fire truck that was bought in 1994 for what, $6,000 roughly?
1941.
1941, yep.
$5,900 and $5,919. And it's the history behind it. They ordered it, and it was delivered December 5th, 1941, which is 2 days before Pearl Harbor, which is interesting.
Interesting fact, Jim, to replace this truck is $750,000 at today's market value.
But it's got a lot of upgrades.
A few.
Plus, also a little history on it. It was built right here in Pontiac. So, all 90 horsepower of it.
So when can they come out and see you here?
We're here every Wednesday during the summer, usually from May to September, from 10:30 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So,
And if they want to help out with monetarily with helping out with this,
yeah, that's
you take donations here. I mean, I'm just saying.
we don't ask for donations,
Right,
but I'll leave it at that. We won't turn them down.
So a lot of family legacy in this, huh?
Quite a bit. I drove this truck into Waterford Township High School, and I've had the cheerleaders riding around the track in the football games and things like that. But that's about it.
Which school?
Waterford Township High School.
Oh, Waterford Township.
Yes.
Which is,
Also, my dad was on the volunteers for 19 years. Can I tell a little story?
yes.
Okay. Back in the 50s, they had full-time firefighters. They would drive the lead pumper to the scene. And when the tone went off, if it was a house fire or something, you needed a tanker pulled. And there was a tanker at Station 2 and a tanker at Station 3. Well, lo and behold, my dad would go to the station, and a guy that lived on Hillcliff, I think his last name was Weber, would come from Hillcliff and go to Station 3. Well, my dad was nearsighted, and Weber was farsighted, or it could have been vice versa, I don't know. But they get to the station, and guess what? Neither one of them had their glasses. So one would see far, and the other one would see near, driving the truck to the fire scene. True story. But back in the days, back in the 50s, they had what they called the call list. And they'd get the call would come into the station, and they would call these firefighters And in turn, the wives of these firefighters would call the other firefighters. And that was before the radios. And then in 1951, 6 firefighters received radios, and the station didn't have to call them then. They would in turn get the call, and the wives would call the other firefighters.
So was it like all, there was volunteer, but there was, is that how it first started out, was just volunteers, or?
In 41, when it started out, with the help of, I believe, Captain Fangboner, and I believe there was a firefighter or a captain or something from Royal Oak, helped organize the fire department here. And at that time, there was 3 paid firefighters,
Oh, okay.
and they were the chiefs.
So they have a
They took
training
care of their
center?
truck. They drove the truck.
I think the original training was 2 hours. So basically 2 hours and you're a firefighter.
Oh.
So you look back at the history in the early 90s, 94, excuse me, I should say, or 1941, there was it was a 2-hour training, is what all the firefighters in Waterford received for their first training.
What's training now?
Hundreds upon hundreds of hours. We train every day. So it's definitely changed a lot.
I used to go with my father on house fires, and he'd go in the building and look around and whatever. He'd come back out and give me his glasses, and I'd keep them until he got done with the fire. And the other fireman there would come out and give him my glasses to me. So I was going there with my dad just to help him. That's it.
So you guys had full-time jobs with, then volunteered also, or?
Full time. I worked for GM on Williams Lake Road, right there.
Oh,
That was quite a while ago.
You know, that continued. GM parts plant produced a lot of firefighters for us because they had the fire station that they actually had inside their plant. So they had GM employees that were firefighters while on duty. So if they had an incident there at their plants, they would go take care of the problem. But GM would let firefighters leave, volunteer firefighters leave the plant to go help their community out. So GM parts plant did a lot for this community back in its day of allowing employees to leave work to actually go on emergency calls throughout the community. And that went on into the 90s. So from early on into the 90s. So the parts plant was a big benefit to the community for allowing people that were trained as firefighters for GM to leave and come help us out and serve as our volunteers. It was a big, I mean, there was a majority of volunteers when I got on. There was a good half dozen or so that were still working at GM parts plant. Pretty big history part of how our department helped grow too.
yeah.
There was a few of the guys too worked for the water department way back then. I mean, and then we've had 3 generations of firefighters. I think Goffs
Goffs, yep.
and well, Hank and I were second generation. And,
Carter Brothers,
Carter Brothers. Yep.
Bridgers. Yep. We've added some over the years for sure.
And Josh Brower from our the TV station,
Yeah, his dad.
his dad was here.
Yep.
So my dad, David Bowerin, started on the Waterford Volunteer Fire Department back in the early 80s. And as kids, we didn't really know what to think of it, other than it was cool that our dad was a firefighter. And I remember one year I had a birthday party on June 1st. And, everybody's together, the family's together, and then around 1 o'clock, the tone went off. Any family knows what that tone is. And it was Station 5. My dad was stationed at Station 5, and he had to go. And for a little bit as a kid, I think I was 12 years old at the time, you were kind of like, oh, this is bad. Dad's taking off during my birthday party. But the older I got, he served for 20 years. And the older that I got, I realized this is a good thing. Like, he's going to help people. He's going to save people. And then we started to realize, that it wasn't about us, that it was okay that Dad took off for a little bit for our birthday party, because he always came back. And that was really an important part growing up, is that you wanted, your dad to come back. We knew the fires, he was fighting. He would, tell us stories. Sometimes we would get to go on runs with him. Of course, we didn't run what I believe they called at the time Code 3, which was lights and siren. We would run Code 2, which is basically get there as fast as you legally can. So with kids in tow, he would take us to these fires. And of course, we stayed in the car the whole time. We weren't able to wander around or everything, but we were watching, the operation of the fire happen. I remember being at the old mill fire, the second or third old mill fire. We were there. I was at the big River's Edge fire that year, sitting in the car. What I remember most about the Waterford Volunteer Fire Association was just the parties. They had a clubhouse, and I believe the building still exists. I don't think they're using it as their clubhouse anymore, but it was on Dixie and Lake Anderson. And the association was so wonderful to the kids. I mean, we had a Christmas party every year, and these Christmas parties were over the top. Santa Claus, they had magic show every year, which ironically resonated with me personally, and now I'm actually a production manager for 2 pretty big traveling magic shows. And that was kind of my influence at one of those Christmas parties. I remember the tetherball games that they had, where each station would set up these 2 big poles and a wire, and they'd have this tetherball that would go back and forth, and each station would compete with each other using their fire hose to push the ball to the opponent's side. I also remember a really just a real strong memory in my head when they got their little trailer that they could do smokehouse demonstrations in, to bring public in and show people what it's like, to be in a fire. Well, part of the training process, the firefighter children became kind of the test dummies, so to speak. And what they would do is they would put us in this house, they would fog it up with theatrical fog, and we would hide in this house. And they told us, hide anywhere you want, find a cupboard, under a bed, and other than a refrigerator, but hide somewhere in the house. And the firefighters would have to come in and find us. And I remember being drug out by, who knows, these monsters come in with these big fire suits, and you didn't know if it was your dad or your dad's buddy or whoever, but they would drag us out of the house. But my memories of the fire department and the volunteer association, again, early on as kids, we didn't really understand what was going on. We heard that tone and knew that Dad would be taking off. But 15 years into it, you start hearing stories from my dad about the people that he saved. My dad always taught me he has never pulled a dead person out of a seatbelt. And that's resonated me for my whole life. I never enter a car without a seatbelt, knowing that my dad told me that. Out of all the accidents that he's been to, he's never pulled a dead person out of a seatbelt. But we, Volunteer Firefighter Association children, are still connected. I still talk to Lorraine Barron, and I still talk to Suzer, and I still talk to a bunch of the kids that are still around. A lot of our parents are gone now, just due to age, but we still talk, and we're still friends for life. And it all stems back to all that stuff that the Volunteer Association did for us kids, because they knew that even though it didn't look like it on paper, the kids were also making sacrifices as well, so that their parents could be on the Volunteer Firefighter Association. My dad, the older he got, he started to slow down a little bit. He saw the new career guys coming in, younger guys. So he would let them go fight the fires. He would let them rush into the house because they wanted to. And Dad would be more of the medic on site. And then Dad even went on to become a medical trainer. So he was training the new guys on, CPR and personal injuries and things like that. So I have just wonderful memories of the Volunteer Firefighter Association. And honestly, it's changed me as an adult now as I continue to go through my life and journey.
So do you guys ever, do a lot of them stop by to say hi to you, or?
Occasionally, yeah.
Occasionally, yeah, that's good.
They'll come in here when they find out that we're here,
Yeah.
and
And early on, the volunteers helped train a lot of the full-time firefighters. So you look at over the history of our department, a lot of firefighters served as volunteer. I spent 4 years as a volunteer firefighter. That's where I started off. And a lot of, like the gentleman standing in front of you here, helped train me as a young firefighter.
I can remember a few runs.
Oh yeah, a few of them for sure. Yeah.
Esther.
So Hank, you had a lot of family in firefighting.
Maybe. My wife was there too.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Esther?
Esther.
You had a brother-in-law, or?
Bruce Bentley was on. And that's about in the family outside of Dad and myself. So
How many years do you do it?
17 years.
17 years.
And not a penny in my hand from the township, believe it or not. So I quit because I went in the service. So I 4 years in the Navy. That was about it.
Yeah.
Came home.
Well, you want to show us some of the photos you got over here?
Sure.
Yeah.
The photo up here on the wall is the fire department from 1949. I have the names of all the firefighters. I haven't put them up there yet, so. And then you go over here, it's from 1991 when the 50th anniversary. There's some over here.
I looked a lot younger then.
Here's Fire Chief Matt when he was a rookie.
What's on top of your head?
And then Hank's right here.
Who?
At that time, he had 16 years in. And I think there's a good looking guy someplace.
You know, the amazing,
Oh, there I am.
There you are.
amazing thing about our volunteer organization too, back in its day, is that there's firefighters that would come and spend 4, 5, 6, 7 years as a volunteer, and they'd fall in love with the fire service, and they'd go to other communities. We have firefighters all over the state of Michigan that started off as volunteers in Waterford. And we even had some that joined like smoke jumping, like out west for forestry firefighting. So it was a really good training ground, you know, for full-time employees. But we needed the volunteers so heavily back then. You know, when I got on, there was 50 volunteer firefighters that assisted the community. And sadly, the state of Michigan has created such stringent training requirements to become harder and harder and harder to keep, you know, volunteer firefighters. It's just a tremendous demand for education. But this was a great training ground, a great training tool, and it was additional people coming to help us. So the fire department was small for a long time, and it slowly was surely growing over time as the calls kept improving, but the volunteers were huge to come in and help. And then a lot of the wives would come and bring, you know, those long 4, 5, 6, 7 hour fires. They'd bring coffee and water and anything they could do to help us out on the fire scene. So it's great organizations, you know, and look what it's done today. It's, you know, it's built this fire station, so pretty incredible.
Yeah, now you also encompass Pontiac now, right?
So in 2000, the fire department expanded to Lake Angeles. We used to cover forever a portion of Lake Angeles, and then there was a long-term contract that had been written where we had shared part of Lake Angeles with Auburn Hills. We had half, they had the other half, and when that contract was expiring, they contracted us for services to cover all of Lake Angeles in 2000. And in 2012, Waterford was in a really bad position financially. Pontiac was in a bad position financially, and coming out of the second Great Recession, and we were contracted service with Pontiac. So we brought in 40 Pontiac firefighters and expanded our department to 9 stations now. So 60 square miles from 36 square miles, so it's a big area.
And it all started.
A lot more runs too.
A lot more runs, yeah.
Oh yeah. How many runs?
14,500. When I got on, Ron, I think we were probably doing 3,000, 3,500 maybe. Mostly medicals, you know, 80% medicals, but yeah, it just keeps on expanding.
And it all started with this truck.
Very much.
Yep.
My dad, Charles Callahan, in 1949, his picture's on there, over there, right now. Long time ago. I wished I was back there, but it's gone. That's it.
So I think an interesting fact to know too is that as the department grew, we had, you know, slowly but surely became a 5-station department covering the 36 square miles of Waterford, and we needed, you know, tremendous help from the volunteers. A lot of volunteers dispatched for us. So when a call would come in and a station would leave, we'd have volunteers come in and spend time and work our radio system, and they would take care of all the 911 calls that would come in, and they would dispatch the trucks to other calls. I know Terry, who's here, she's spent a long time doing that with us, and there were some great voices, we used to call it, like Bob Monahan. If anyone remember Bob Monahan, he was the calmest person on the radio you could ever have, but it was a great experience to have that help because, you know, when someone was tied up in dispatch, that kept a truck from going on the road, so the volunteers would come in and cover the radios. Big storms come in and help us with the radios, and then, you know, help us through all the calls that would come in. So it was a big part of our department to help grow, is having volunteers come in as dispatch grew to help us do that.
So when did the volunteering stop?
We kind of got phased out around 2013, 14.
Yeah, 2013, 2014, right around there.
I went from roughly like 3 firefighters out of 40 were paid, and then for the most part, later on, it was almost a 50-50 deal. But along with everything else, we progressed into a full-time fire department.
Yeah. As call volume changed, so in the early 70s, Waterford decided to become a paramedic-based fire service. So meaning that in the 70s, we had firefighters become one of the first group of firefighters in the state of Michigan to become paramedics. Southfield, Waterford, and Pontiac were kind of first in the 70s to do this. And so we added a millage to add 12 firefighters, so basically 4 firefighters per shift. And the same thing occurred in the late 80s. And then we did it again in the late, it was 2003, we expanded another millage. So as we started hiring more and more firefighters, you know, the volunteerism started slowing down. And like I said, we had 50. In the 1991, there was 50 volunteers on the fire department. Each fire station out of the 5 had 10 volunteer firefighters assigned to it. So they had 5 days and 5 nights firefighters based on, you know, whatever shift that person worked. And then slowly but surely it's over the probably a 10-year period, it died. And sadly, volunteerism's one thing in America that we're really lacking. Like volunteerism's continuing to drive down, but a lot less companies are allowing people to leave their job to go help their community out. So like I said, GM, Ford, all those companies allow their employees to go help their communities out, and that's gone. And then the training demand, the states requires a lot more training. The medical trainings requires continuing education. The fire service requires it, so it's harder and harder to train the volunteer organizations. There's very few surviving anymore. Our neighbors that had volunteer fire departments are almost gone. Now they're paid on call, so they receive dollars for every call they go on. But that's dying out too. So.
It's hard to find volunteers right now because of the time. The time and the training that you have to have. Volunteers have to have the same training as the career firefighters. So.
Yeah, it's a real struggle.
It costs money to volunteer.
Yeah, the dollars and cents, it costs the same for the training, for sure. And then, like I said, the volunteer organization was, they've done a lot for the community over the years too. I think it'd be a shame if we didn't mention what the volunteers have done, from sponsoring T-ball teams to special events for the community, to volunteering for the parades, to, I mean, Ron, you can speak to it probably better than I can, but I mean, the volunteer organization wasn't just a fire service. They did a lot for the community. And
a lot of charity work.
Yeah.
The Waterford Goodfellows, they were part of the Waterford Goodfellows.
Which you still are.
Yes.
You and Terry? Yes.
Yes.
But again, I mean, without that volunteerism, the volunteer organization in Waterford was a big, powerful organization in the community, because, you know, you had people spread out through the whole entire community. You know, basically whatever. If you're a volunteer at that station area, that, like say Station 5, you lived in that area, you were a Station 5 volunteer firefighter, but you were tied to the community, so you understood what the needs were of the community. So they were a huge success on the department growing, because when we pushed for like our millages to get the ALS system, the volunteers were part of helping push that our organization, you know, up to where it is today. So they were a big push to get us there.
And you guys did you always work with the police department too?
Yeah, I mean, Waterford Fire and Waterford Police have always had a really great relationship.
They had volunteers too, or?
They had they call it a reserve program.
Reserve, yeah.
So, but the reserve program, they would work with a full-time police officer.
So what year did you start, Hank?
I don't remember. Just a lot of fun.
1900s?
I don't know.
You know, I think it was right around 75, 1975, maybe.
Could be, I don't know.
We had 16 years in 91, so I could.
When did you start, Ron?
I'm a two-timer.
Oh, okay.
I got
Is your
on
wife
and-
now? Sorry.
Well, we won't go into that, okay? I got on in 78, and then for reasons I won't go into, I got off in 81.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, I had a little sabbatical there and I got back on in 88. And here I am.
Yeah.
I'm still part of the, the association is still around. It's just that we're inactive, and this is our community service, what we're doing now with
Excellent.
this station here. And we still show up for parades and anything the department needs. We'll try to help.
And what do you have over here on this desk? This is what it would look like when
Yeah.
when somebody would bring the calls in?
It did start out the kind of progression. This is a call list from the 1950s. That old still. There. And then from this, from the phone, that's the Motorola radio. That's what it went to from the telephone relay system. And then we got to a point where all the volunteers had a radio. They had one in the car, and this is a pager. I went to the pager. Each volunteer had a pager.
So did somebody call 911 and it went to either police or fire? Is that how it worked? I mean,
There was two emergency line numbers for the fire department that would ring into, and if they called the police department would transfer it over to the firefighters. The firefighters would receive the call. So that was pretty prevalent. It was 7172, I think, were the last two digits of the number. But I remember when I was a kid, we had the orange sticker on our phone. It was police and fire, and so it's evolved quite a bit. So interesting to talk about. Ron talks about the progression from someone had to call the fire station, right? And then it was call everybody to get them to come. Then the radio developed, and only so many people had radios, so they still had to call. Calling went on for quite a long time because, and as the radios developed, an interesting thing now is you see a smartphone sitting on that desk. It's my smartphone, but that when 911 call comes into dispatch, when they enter the computer information, it automatically goes to my phone. And whatever unit you're assigned to, say if you're on an engine or like me being the chief, and if they hit the chief button, my phone will alert me saying that I have a call to go to. And all the information's on your phone. And you can actually listen to the radios now on your phone. You can't talk on the radios on ours yet, but that's coming. But and a lot of dispatch now, it's computer voice. So we went from someone sitting at a desk having to talk to where now a computer voice will tell you what to do. So it's come a long ways.
As a volunteer,
That's Gary.
as a volunteer, were you guys allowed to, when I went to a fire and there was a victim that wasn't breathing or something? I mean, were you able to do
Yes.
something?
We were trained, a lot of us were EMTs or a medical first responder. I think there's some paramedics there, yeah.
So they would do everything. So they were right hands on hands with the firefighters. The full-time firefighters and the volunteer worked as one. So they jumped in, did CPR, hooked patients up to oxygen, to backboarding them, to cutting them out of a car, to fighting the fire. So they were able to do everything. But the only thing that didn't happen was, as a paramedic, there was medications and IVs were one of the few things that they couldn't do. But other than that, they could help us out with volunteers. We could do everything. So
That's right,
Yeah.
you know what?
You guys are amazing.
It's really amazing that people worked a full-time job, and then on the rest of their days, they gave up their time to their community for nothing. I mean, that's the most amazing part, is that someone could take that much time out of life, because it took a lot of time. It took a lot of time away from their families.
Training, you had the runs, you had to,
Yep.
keep certified if you're an EMT or a medical first responder too, or paramedic.
Yeah,
You got to keep recertifying with the state. So
Did you guys have to get your own insurance, or how was that? Was there a blanket insurance? Or?
I think they're always covered by the township insurance, but the volunteer association did have its own insurance policy for years, like a secondary backup insurance. They actually provided work comp coverage, I believe, for the firefighters too. So there was a budget that, and every year in the annual fire department budget, there was a percentage of money that would go to the volunteer organization, not to the individuals, but they had a volunteer clubhouse. So that's where they would have their meetings, and they would have like social events and stuff and trainings. And that was kind of that's where they ran the association from, but then they would have station lieutenants and officers that would oversee the volunteer group for like specific stations.
Yeah, we'd go up to the station, lieutenant, each station had a lieutenant, you would go up there and you'd do training there too. So.
And I think what Terry said too, there were several of our firefighters over the year that were full-time firefighters, and then on their days off gave back to the fire service again in our community. And you might be speaking to one of them right here.
Yeah, I put in 25 years in Bloomfield.
Well,
So that people like Ron were a great firefighter to have around because they had tremendous knowledge. They brought knowledge from another department to us too, so we were able to share what they learned at other departments to bring with us and help us out. So,
And vice versa.
yep.
It worked both ways.
so like when the Marines say they're once a Marine, always a Marine, once a firefighter, always a firefighter?
You're always a firefighter. You may retire, but you're still a firefighter. Yep,
It's in the blood, huh?
it's in the blood, that's right.
Well, you want to, so the thing is called the Volunteers, huh? The name of the,
Well, we put that on there mainly for the parades and that, be recognized a little bit. But
Been on there a long time though.
yeah, 1961, the township sold that truck to the Volunteers Association for $1, with the stipulation that it be kept in service in case the township needed it. Let's
That's
hope they don't
expensive.
get that desperate to need it now.
We're in trouble.
But it still runs,
Yep.
so,
Ron's one of the one that helps keep it running every day, so it's a lot of work.
yes, it is.
so Ron, you got some helmets and jackets over there? Are those
Yeah.
for
Those
volunteers, or are those from firemen?
They're from
Both?
the
You guys wore the same?
Volunteers.
Do you guys have different equipment? I mean, if you're a volunteer, then it was all the same, huh?
Only thing, you know, they would distinguish, our helmets would distinguish if we're a volunteer or career, and that was just for identification type deal.
Oh,
When a firefighter puts all their equipment on, sometimes it's hard to recognize them. So if you look at the coats that are hanging up over here, you'll see that they have their name on it, so that you can see the name on their back and know who they were. And then, like I said, Ron just talked about the helmet, the different colors of helmets, and that was to identify like a full-time firefighter versus an driver engineer. And then the red helmets were for our station officers or our lieutenants, and the volunteers and the full-time lieutenants wore the same color.
so this saves time, huh?
Correct.
Getting laundry on?
You do see a little evolution of gear. You know, very thin material, didn't do a whole lot for you, didn't do much protection, up to, you know, when you go to this tan gear, it's going to be your newer of the gear that we had. So this would probably be in the early to late 90s that we started getting this Janesville and this style. They've really improved fire gear over the years.
It went from from 3/4 boots.
Rookie. That's a rookie.
So
Looks like yours, Hank.
what Ron's going to show you is that they used to just have a really, really long coat, and they used to have what's called 3/4 boots. They were rubber boots just like the ones in front of you, but those rubber boots come up to above your knee, and you didn't have any type of pants on fighting a fire.
Helmet like this, and a rubber coat.
A rubber coat for a fire.
That was, yep, you didn't go too far, and did you, Ron? No. So one of the things with fire gear, go from this technology to today's technology, one of the downfalls to the modern technology with the fire gears is it allows us to go farther and farther into fires because they have such great heat resistance and thermal barriers. So firefighters are going deeper and deeper as we keep progressing in time. We go farther and farther into fires, which creates a higher danger level. So this gear, you knew when it was too hot, and you knew when you needed to back out. This gear, sometimes it's too late by the time you realize that it's too hot.
Back in the day too, firefighters would maybe have a little part of their skin showing, their wrist or ears. And if they started getting hot, they were in too far.
So being wives of the firefighters, when you heard a call, what'd you guys think?
You're talking about one of these things?
The tone went off and we knew they were going. They were going, they'd be home when they got home and they took care of what they needed taken care of.
Right.
Yeah?
And they had a good fellowship.
They had-
So you
They
knew they
did.
had each other's backs,
That's right.
Yes.
but you're still worried?
Hank was always the designated driver if they were having a party because he did not drink. So,
Most of the guys didn't because they
No.
knew that they were on call. They knew they could get called out
Right.
at any moment.
yep.
So they didn't a lot of time. Those three-quarter boots and that rubber coat that you had on, and a funny thing with that is that they played water ball. We had an amazing
Yes.
water ball group, and they played with different departments. We played with Independence, we played Mayville, Rochester, Birmingham, White Lake. We would set up, and that gear is great for that. Not for firefighting so much anymore, but it's great for water ball.
So water ball, so you understand what water ball is, it's basically like volleyball so the big ball on a cable between two poles, and you use hose lines and you fight to see which side you get the ball on. If you hit the other person's pole, you get a point. So you would battle with fire hoses to see who can score the most points. So we do that against our neighboring communities. We're doing that still into the 90s.
Yes.
Playing water ball. There's still water ball groups that get together in our northern fire services.
Yeah.
So they play it still today.
This is what the firemen had wore underneath those, keep their ears out.
Yeah, he has what's called a Nomex hood. So that's a fire-resistant material. And it's just another protection for your skin from the heat and the flames. It's limited protection, but it does protect you. So, and then you'd put that with your mask on, and then you'd have that complete seal around your skin to help protect your face and your ears. And again, that's equipment that lets you go a little bit too far into the fire. So it's just a different times.
So with water ball, that's got to be warm though, wearing them things. Because
Yeah,
you're going
but
to be
you
doing
get
water
warm.
ball during the summertime, right?
It's a good workout. We had a lot of fun playing water ball back in the day. We won a lot of events too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I kind of say that's missing, what our teenagers nowadays don't have, is all the groups used to get together and have these picnics, and kids got to learn about what firefighters were and the different organizations. We don't seem to have that anymore.
So for me, I was 19 years old. I went to Eastern Michigan for a year. I came back from Eastern Michigan after having a little rough first couple semesters. And Kent Thanes, who was a longtime volunteer here, I knew his daughter, and we were talking one day. He said, "Why don't you try the volunteers?" My grandfather was a West Bloomfield volunteer firefighter. My uncle was a Tri-City volunteer firefighter. And I said, "Why not? I'll try it." And I fell in love, and now I hear him today as the chief of the department. So it's definitely, and I grew up fast. You know, you had a bunch of adults, you know, Ron at the time and Hank and those guys. They were the ones that kind of took me as a young kid and kind of corralled me in and kept me on the straight and narrow. So it was a good learning experience.
There's kids in high school, I can't say guys, because it's been both men and women from the high school that go in as a cadet. Does that program still
We
exist?
still have a cadet program, yeah.
So they start as cadets, and then they go to volunteers, and then, as Matt said before, they progress to other departments. So when you get the bug, you get it bad, and you get it a lot of times young, a lot of times if you've got family. You get the bug, and you're a firefighter forever.
So you are speaking to our first female firefighter, by the way.
Yes.
Terry was the first Waterford female firefighter, and she also served as a dispatcher for us for a long time. So not only as a volunteer firefighter, she was coming in and doing the dispatching that we talked about earlier.
I was not only the wife, I was the firefighter too.
That more or less started out brewing coffee.
Yeah, as
I-
an
with
auxiliary,
Sylvia.
they would call it in most departments, but yeah.
Yeah. Sylvia and I started, well, Sylvia trained me on the coffee and the hot chocolate and the water and stuff when we had the big fires. We had the big ski pole factory fire at 59. You guys were there for probably 2 days, I'm gonna guess. Oliver Supply. We would take coffee and stuff like that. Those are all fires that are these guys have been on these fires, and we've been there to give them a little bit of moral support to get them through.
Fantastic. It's a family affair.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good example of the volunteers. It was a family.
It really was.
It really was. I mean, most of the wives were involved. The kids would start getting involved, so it kept growing up. You know, that's why they talk about family tradition. The fire service. There was a lot of family tradition with the volunteer organization in Waterford, especially.
I joked and said that the best New Year's Eve I had was on a house fire because Ron was at work in Bloomfield. I went to the house fire with the guys in the department. I had more dates than anybody that New Year's Eve.
And then the Huron Theater fire, where they all left home on Christmas Eve and didn't return home until a day after Christmas.
And then had a long
That
time
was a
picking
big
up
fire.
hose, frozen hose.
This is back in the 50s. They had a grass fire, and it was way in the boondocks. And Ed Smith, he was his chief back then. My dad jumped in the car. They threw me in the back seat. There's a 51 Pontiac, and we're bouncing through this field going to this grass fire. I remember that to this day. Yeah.
You know, one of the problems of being a volunteer firefighter is that you knew everybody in the community. So when you had those really horrific, tragic events, you know, a kid trapped in a car or someone hit by a train, it was usually somebody you knew. So somebody that was going to show up at that fire scene most likely knew that person. So because everyone lived in the community. Now you see firefighters, they live all over the area. They don't all live in the community that they work in. So one of the troubles for the volunteers was that you were running on a lot of times people you knew.
So you had to check your
Yeah,
emotions.
you had that neighbor that was, you know, that had that chronic problem. You were over there all the time trying to help them out, and then, you know, sadly, you were on a lot of deaths that were family friends, and it's a tough spot to be as a volunteer in a community.
Happened to me. I was in the house shaving, and next door neighbor, I heard the radio go off. Next door neighbor was sitting in his car, and had to do CPR on him. And it's different when you go to the scene, because you know someone's going to be back or helping you right away. And they got there quick, but it's an experience that, you know, having a neighbor go down, or look at Austin, my grandson.
Yes, Chief Covey, would you care to? We had a grandson who had a medical emergency. Chief Covey, in his infinite wisdom, whisked him right up, put him in the back of the rescue, and they were gone before I could even turn around.
I got to go too.
Yeah, Ron got to go, and the guys left, and that was before I went through the fire department and fire academy, and I'm going, excuse me, what did they just do with my grandson? They just took him. So, and they gave him excellent care, and yes,
He's a grown adult now.
He is a grown adult now, and he does remember that to this day.
That's pretty wild. Now today, you're dealing with a lot of youngsters and drugs now instead of fires, right?
So we've throughout the history of me being on the department for over 30 years now, you know, heroin, fentanyl, all those drugs have been a chronic problem for a long, long time. Sadly, obviously, it's more prevalent now than it ever has been. And, you know, we do have an amazing drug now called Narcan that reverses it, but it's no guarantee. So we do see a lot of tragedy from their narcotics that are on the street in both Waterford, Pontiac, and, you know, all the surrounding communities. The drugs, they don't pick a social class, they pick everybody. So it doesn't matter what community you're in, from Bloomfield Township to Waterford to West Bloomfield to Pontiac to wherever. It's a chronic problem everywhere anymore.
So, like, you guys had to do CPR before and break ribs or something, and now you have something new that does it for you?
Yeah, so we have what's called a Lucas device. So a Lucas device is a cardiac machine that you hook up to a person. A board goes behind their back and it goes over top of their chest, and it actually does compressions for you. And on a positive note, it actually has on the downstroke, it does exact precise distance it's supposed to go, then it actually has a negative suction on the way up, so it helps open the lungs up. So our survivability and cardiac arrest is greatly improved because of it. So every one of our trucks carries those now. So back in the day, we were the Lucas devices.
Yeah.
So, you do CPR. The idea behind the new machines is it's uninterrupted CPR. The problem when a human does it is you have to switch and take breaks, and then you have other tasks that you have to do, so you have to stop. This machine stays doing its job the whole time, and you can do other things. So,
Because you guys used to have, because I worked construction for almost 40 years, and you guys would come and train us with CPR every year. We had to be,
so we still offer, just so you know, the fire department still offers second Saturday every month. We offer a CPR class. Our idea is the more people that know CPR, the better off we are, and that puts people in the community that know it. So if someone does go down at a restaurant, there's someone there that can help them. So we offer those classes, and we've offered those classes for years. So it's been a good thing.
and it changes constantly.
Yeah, it's still the same premise, though.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, depends on what doctor writes the latest paper on it. So
Well, it's not breasts anymore. Oh,
we
yeah.
still provide ventilations because of the EMS side of things. We have equipment that does that for us. So, but yeah.
This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you, Ron, coming out here and
You're welcome.
showing us.
You're welcome.
This is an amazing place.
It's phenomenal. Great community position right here to have this history here and history maintained, and we got to carry it on.
Yes. Thank you, Hank, very much, and Esther,
You're welcome.
and Terry.
Thank you.
My better half.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any other words, or everybody say peace out?